Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of really fascinating sources. You sent over a brand new international poll and the latest legislative plans coming out of Westminster.
That's right.
And I think our mission today, for you listening, is to really cut through the noise on Brexit. It's been 10 years since the vote, and we want to deliver a sharp, concise analysis of where the UK actually stands, politically, economically, right now.
It's an important thing to do because, it's still such a charged topic, but this data, it gives us a really clear line of sight. It helps separate the emotion from the actual perceived outcomes.
Right.
So we're going to focus on two main things. First, the hard data, what it says about public pessimism and, democratic disillusionment. And second, the UK political strategy, what Sir Keir Starmer's government is trying to do with this legislative reset.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not here to relitigate the vote itself. We're here to analyze the consequences, how the public sees it, and how politicians are now responding.
Yeah, exactly. We'll look at where people feel it failed to deliver on those big promises, the economy, control, immigration, and then we'll dig into how the government is trying to sort of mitigate the damage without reversing the whole thing.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with the public verdict. This FGS global poll is huge. 20,000 people with more than 2,000 in the UK. And their results, they feel like more than just a temperature check. They seem to reveal a kind of deep national mood.
Gloom is the word that I keep coming back to. When you isolate the UK findings and then you compare them globally, the level of, national pessimism it's really notable.
That's what jumped out at me. The question about the country's trajectory. 67% of UK voters feel the nation's best years are behind us.
And look at the other side of that.
Right, only 14% think the best years are still ahead.
And that 14% figure is the lowest percentage of optimists in the entire survey, across more than 27 democracies. This isn't just, low morale. It suggests a really deep-seated belief that the national project has sort of peaked.
And that feeling translates into a lack of faith in where the country's headed day to day.
Overwhelmingly, 73% of people in Britain believe the country is going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But for me, the most tragic number really is about the next generation.
I saw that.
A striking 77% of people in the UK feel life will not be better for their children and grandchildren. Again, the lowest score in the survey. That tells you people feel these consequences aren't temporary. They're generational.
Wow. That really paints a clear picture.
Yeah.
So let's connect that general feeling directly to Brexit itself. The original rallying cry, the thing that won a vote, was all about sovereignty taking back control.
And this is where the data shows this profound disconnect between that promise and what people feel the reality is. 72% of British voters said the UK now has less control over its affairs than it did before.
Wait, less control. That's the literal opposite of what was promised.
It is. If you look at the support for the slogan itself, only 15% believe taking back control actually lived up to its promise. But, we should pause on that 15% for a second.
Okay.
It's important not to see the electorate as one single block. That 15% is still a significant number of people who feel the policy did succeed, probably in ways they prioritize, like, symbolic sovereignty. But the overwhelming majority, that 72%, they feel politically disempowered.
And the economic verdict must be a huge part of that feeling. It's hard to feel in control when your economy feels like it's stalling.
Precisely. 2 in 3 voters, that's 66%, said Brexit has hurt the economy. Only 22% said it had a positive impact. When a huge political project that was supposed to unlock prosperity is now seen as damaging by a 2/3 majority, that creates immense pressure for some kind of change.
And then there's immigration and borders.
Yeah.
Arguably the most visceral part of the whole debate. Did it deliver there?
The numbers are just so consistent. 66% said cutting links with Brussels has not given them greater power over borders. Only 22% felt that promise was achieved. The data really suggests that for the average voter, the 3 main pillars, economy, control, and borders, are all seen as failures.
This brings us to a really interesting point about political memory. Let's talk about Project Fear. That was the term used to dismiss all the warnings from the Remain side, wasn't it?
It was, yes. All those forecasts of economic shock, trade friction, they were all labeled Project Fear. And this specific finding in the poll, it represents a critical psychological shift.
How so?
The survey found that 55% of voters now believe those grim forecasts have turned out to be true.
So more than half the country now accepts the very narrative that was once mocked.
Exactly. And only 23% disagree. That acceptance is a huge deal. It shows the public isn't just, unhappy with the government. They're concluding that the specific negative predictions about leaving the single market were actually accurate. It's more than disappointment. It's a recalibration of who they trust.
It's easy to just focus on the UK here, but these numbers also fit into a much broader global frustration with politics in general, right?
That's a crucial piece of context, yes. The UK results are stark, but they align with a global crisis of faith. For example, the UK had the highest percentage in the whole survey of people agreeing that voting makes no difference to their lives. That's 27%.
A quarter of the population.
And that feeling of powerlessness, it's the foundation for all the frustration with the Brexit outcomes.
And globally, the picture isn't much better.
Not at all. 69% of people worldwide think democracy is getting weaker, and 74% believe the system serves a rich and powerful elite. When you have that global mood, and you add a local political project that is widely seen to have failed, you get serious fatigue.
And you see that fatigue showing up in some pretty worrying attitudes towards how we should be governed, especially among younger people.
Yes, the sources really highlight a concerning split there.
Tell us about that Gen Z perspective.
18% of Gen Z in the UK, the youngest voters, say they favor authoritarian leaders who do not bother with elections.
18%. 1 in 5.
Now compare that to British baby boomers, where only 7% would support that. This isn't just about wanting a different policy. It reflects a willingness to just abandon the democratic process entirely. It's likely driven by a belief that the system is just broken.
That's a huge generational gap. So before we get to the political fix for all this, how does the rest of Europe see the UK situation? Do they feel better off now?
The consensus in Europe is a clear no. The EU is not better off. 50% of European voters said the EU isn't better off without the UK. Only 19% think it was a net positive for the bloc.
So they miss the UK. Do they want Britain back in?
Overwhelmingly, yes. A clear majority, 66%, would like Britain to rejoin. Only 16% are against it, which suggests the political elites might be a bit more cautious about readmission than the general public is.
But here's the fascinating part, for me anyway. It's the strategic conclusion Europe seems to be drawing from this whole experience.
Yes, the deterrent effect. 59% of Europeans believe that seeing the negative effects on the UK has made it much less likely that any other country will leave.
So in a way, Brexit has accidentally become the EU's biggest retention tool.
It's functioning as a massive, real-world warning sign, a don't do this case study.
Okay, so despite all this gloom in the UK and this open door from Europe, the British public is still pretty conflicted about actually reversing the decision.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Even with this negative assessment, there's no clear mandate to rejoin. When the poll asked directly if Britain should rejoin, it's 50% yes, 38% no. That looks like a majority.
But the phrasing of the question is everything.
It is. Because when you flip the question and ask if the UK should not rejoin, 49% agree with that statement and only 36% disagree. The numbers are basically a toss-up. It just depends on how you ask.
Which tells you how deep the political division still is. People might hate the consequences, but they're not all ready to just undo the decision itself.
And that sets the stage perfectly for the political strategy we're seeing now. If the public thinks the economy is damaged but they're not clamoring to rejoin, the government needs another way. A mitigation strategy.
And that's where Sir Keir Starmer's Brexit reset comes in.
Exactly. The political class knows they have to address the economic friction. This strategy is an attempt to rebuild trust. The sources, they detailed this upcoming bill that would grant ministers pretty sweeping powers for something called dynamic alignment.
Dynamic alignment. It sounds like classic political jargon. Let's break down what it actually means for a business or a consumer.
In simple terms, it means the UK voluntarily chooses to bring its own laws in line with specific EU laws, but only in very technical specific areas. We're talking about things like food standards, animal welfare rules, pesticide regulations.
Things where UK businesses are probably following EU rules anyway if they want to sell there.
That's the rationale. The UK food and farming sectors already largely follow these rules because the EU is a massive export market. So the goal is pragmatic. It's about reducing the expensive and time-consuming paperwork and the border checks.
So smoother trade, less economic friction, which makes sense if 66% of people think the economy's been hurt.
That's the immediate goal.
But this is where the political fight really kicks off, isn't it? The idea of aligning with EU law, even in this limited way, is causing a huge backlash. Critics are accusing the government of trying to undo Brexit, of surrendering freedom.
Well, they see it as a surrender because of the core trade-off here. When the UK was an EU member, it had a vote. It had a seat at the table when these laws were made.
Right.
If the UK goes for dynamic alignment now, it would have to accept any new EU laws in those sectors without getting a vote.
So we'd be following the rules of the club, but we're standing outside the room where the rules are made.
That is the fundamental compromise. You get the economic benefit of smoother trade, but you lose your political voice in shaping the rules. The supporters argue that, look, all international agreements involve shared rules, and the economic benefit here is worth it.
Let's be clear about the limits of this reset, though, because Starmer has drawn some very firm red lines.
He has. First, and this is a big one, he has resisted all calls to rejoin the customs union. It's really crucial that you understand the difference here.
Okay, so explain that. What's the difference between this single market alignment they're doing and rejoining the customs union, which they aren't?
The key is independent trade policy. The customs union requires every member to have the same external tariffs on goods from the rest of the world. So if the UK rejoined, it would lose the ability to strike its own trade deals with countries like the US or India.
So by ruling that out, they keep one of the core promises of Brexit, the ability to be global Britain and make their own deals.
Correct. They're focusing on regulatory alignment with the single market on things like food, which helps trade with Europe, but they keep their external trade policy separate.
And there's another red line, right?
Yes. The second non-negotiable is freedom of movement. That core principle of the EU single market that allows people to live and work anywhere in the bloc. That is completely off the table.
So the strategy is a real tightrope walk. You've got this pragmatic economic relief through alignment, but you're fiercely guarding sovereignty on trade deals and especially on borders.
And if we connect this back to the big picture, this whole dynamic alignment plan is a tactical response to the poll. It's an attempt to fix the economic harm that 66% of people are feeling without having to reverse Brexit entirely.
It's like they're trying to get the economic benefits of being close to the EU without paying the political price of full membership.
It's a calculated risk. Proponents call it common sense. Critics call it a slow, insidious return to EU control. And that tension right there, that sums up the whole unstable political situation.
So what does all this mean for you, the learner? This deep dive shows a public that is, well, deeply disillusioned with how Brexit turned out. Outless control, a herd economy, this feeling of national decline, and that has forced a political strategy of incremental alignment just to ease the friction.
While still strictly ruling out rejoining in the customs union or bringing back freedom of movement.
And that brings us back to that wider feeling we saw in the survey, that numbers that goes far beyond the UK. 74% of people globally believe the system serves a rich and powerful elite over ordinary working people.
So, given that dynamic alignment means accepting EU rules without getting a vote on them, it raises a really important question for you to think about. In a world of complex supply chains and shared rules, does that public desire for absolute control fundamentally conflict with how a modern global economy actually works? Or is that feeling of powerlessness really just a symptom of a deeper, more pervasive democratic fatigue, something for you to mull over until our next deep dive?